Hello, everybody. This is Stephen McNallen with another episode of Gods, Folk, and Destiny. Whose gods? Our gods and goddesses, the holy powers of the north, led by Odin and Frigga. Whose folk? Our folk, born of ancient Hyperborea, now spanning the globe with eyes on the stars. Whose destiny? Our destiny, which we will win by hard work and mighty deeds. Honor, sovereignty, well-being, and the existence of our people forever. So shall it be. Tonight, Edred Thorson didn't make it, so we're punting. I don't know what the problem is on his end. It obviously could be any of a number of things. We've communicated with him, and for whatever reason, this is broken down. So tonight, we're going to freewheel a little bit. And luckily, my producer is Dave Martell, never at a lack for words. So we're going to talk about things. But first, let me read you the introduction I would have done for Edred, because I still want to get him on the program. He's an awesome guy. I've known him since like 1978 or something like that. So what I was going to say, Edred Thorson, the absolute go-to man on anything dealing with Germanic esoterica, and I don't say this lightly. His qualifications include a doctorate in the subject, the mastery of relevant languages, and literally decades of personal exploration and personal practice. His new book, one of many, because he's always putting out new books, is titled Re-tribalize Now. And we're going to talk about that and a lot of other things. And in fact, I think we are going to kind of kick that idea around in our meanderings. It's certainly a subject that people talk about a lot, but what do people mean by tribes? Where does all that go? So we will be talking the tribe thing a little bit, but also lots of other things. If you've got questions you've been burning to ask me, well, burn no longer. Bring that in on the chat and we'll see what's what. But before I get started, remember the 4 things that you need to do if you like what we do here and want to support it. You need to subscribe. You need to like it. You need to comment, all that interaction stuff, good thing for all of us, and share it with other people. I don't do this as a hobby. I don't need a hobby. I don't want a hobby. I have a mission instead, and I need you to help me on that mission. The mission is to change the world. At my age, I kind of plan things around how many years I've got left. I think I've got a few really good years left, and I plan on kicking major butt every inch of the way. So I need your cooperation. Let's make this work. Help me change the world. Let's do it. So there we are. Dave, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing wonderful, Mr. McNallen. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing okay. Always have a plan B, and I think we're both good at that. So you want to talk about this tribe thing a little bit? You want to kick that around?
Sure. Well, when it comes to, would you like me to get started here? Well, okay. So
please, yes, go right ahead. Fire it up.
When it comes to tribe for me, anyways, in my conception of how we have kind of decayed as a society, socially, culturally, and spiritually, has really come from the kind of the atomization of individuals as they recoil and withdraw from communities. And we are a social creature. Human beings are a social creature. All over the world, we are social creatures. We have, if you're somebody that puts a lot of stock into science, that due to evolutionary pressures, especially those of us, our folk that hail from the north, we have evolved due to evolutionary environmental pressures to create a evolutionary group strategy that is the best possible for us and our species, our genetics to survive. And that was tribalism. Tribalism is inherent in us more so than anybody else in the world Probably. Yeah, at least that's my summation of it. So when this kind of decayed and became less of our everyday life is when our people really started to experience social, societal, and cultural sickness. And we're seeing this all over the place now. Everybody talks about how like these new generations of kids coming up are even like, they're like I don't want to say they're worse, because I know a lot of young guys that are really, really great guys. Young ladies that are really, really great ladies. I don't want to, take a crap on the whole generation. There's great ones, but there it is objectively true that each generation kind of loses social skills. Suicide rates among these young people is higher than it ever has been. Drug addiction, all of this stuff, and according to studies, especially with the drug addiction stuff, it's really coming from isolation and atomization and kind of not having a support structure, not having safety nets of people around you. So just even in a living pragmatic sense, tribalism being taken away from us has been so damaging to our psyches, to our culture, and to our spirits as well.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. Obviously, Edred, I'm quoting him from an interview he did with someone else recently. He said that tribalization, or correction, re-tribalization, actually, he said, is the best form of radical revolt against the modern world. Obviously, invoking Julius Evola in that, and that's something we hear a lot from the people that we hang around with. With the revolt against the modern world, yeah. And the need to fight modernity. Talking about technology, I don't know anybody that's a total Luddite and wants to live in a cave or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But what we are missing are exactly those things you mentioned: a sense of identification, a sense of unity with somebody else, with a group of people that you know and can trust and can depend on. And that's what tribes do and have done. And you have had tribes, of course, all around the world. I mean, there's the Bantu tribes, and Africa's full of tribes, and northern Burma, as they used to call it, Myanmar, is loaded with these different ethnic groups, which are not exactly tribes, but they're kind of like tribes. They're actually states now. But all of these things originally came from just the very primordial hunting bands and gathering bands and things like that. Families, basically, groups of families. Mm-hmm. So how would you draw the distinction between a tribe and, say, something like a band, or the Männerbund, or anything of that sort?
Well, my distinction would be a band would be just like a group of individuals, and then a tribe is a group of families or family units, or just like something larger than, say, just like a band. To me, it would be like a band, and then you would go up to a tribe, and then you would go up to I would probably say a nation. A nation is a collection of tribes that are united under, as some of the Greek thinkers would say, under ethnos. That's what kind of tied all the tribes together. So with what tribe is, why we talk about tribes all the time. You talk about it, I talk about it, Master Chim talks about it, Ed Thorson talks about it. We all talk about it because of how really important it is, because it's really tapping it. You just mentioned about revolting against the modern world. That got me all fired up, because that's my whole shtick, is revolting against the modern world, reconnecting with what makes you human, reconnecting with that primordial might, that primordial form, that natural state, that state of a transcendence and enlightenment, that it just comes naturally from organically being in touch with other humans around you that are like-minded, that look like you, sound like you, talk like you, have similar interests, similar drives, similar motivations, similar beliefs. All of this stuff comes together to make something beautiful, and something that really taps into something that's deep down within our genetic memory and brings out the best of us. So because look at modern society today. I'm guilty of it. I look at my screen all the time. Everybody's guilty of looking at their screen. It's hard. Let me tell you something. So I've been running my Kindred for about 7 years. It'll be 7 or 8 years this Yule. It is like pulling teeth getting people out of their house. It is like pulling teeth getting people to show up because we have been shaped so deeply to reject these things that are so natural. But once people get out of their house, once they get out of the house and they come to an event or whatever, they brighten up in a way that you never see before. They, the joy, the happiness of being around people that care about you and love you. And let me tell you something, nothing is more pragmatically functional and good to have than somebody that can take care of you. Having a tribe is the best in modern times, because what happens in modern times, man, when bad things happen, when you have a string of bad luck, your car breaks down, you get fired from your job, you get evicted, blah, blah, blah. It's just like an avalanche, and it gets worse and worse and worse, and you got nobody there to pick you up, because we've been conditioned in modern society to have this kind of, all right, you're grown up, leave the house, get out of here, get away from your parents, go move across the country, go, and then we just kind of treat land like economic zones, and we bounce around. We're bug men. So when you have this community, especially when it's in your general vicinity, when you can have somebody to call up, or somebody calls you and checking on you, and like all, I know this isn't really metaphysical or big brained or anything. It's very pragmatic, but it's true, and it's really important. It's something that we need to get back in touch with. I know I kind of got off the difference between like a band and a tribe, but I just want to reiterate kind of the pragmatic use of having a tribe.
Yeah, I think we can start by kind of looking at the way that all of this developed within the context of the Osseter revival. Back in the very early days, like in 1970, back in there, I had the idea of local gatherings that would be skepslogs. The skepslog is a ship's crew, and with the division of labor that kind of implies. And after a while, I decided that was kind of a foreign concept, and and a foreign word, and oh my God, and here it is. This is another religion, and I'm having enough time learning all this Old Norse stuff anyway, and I don't even know how to pronounce the names of the gods, and much less the goddesses. And so, how am I going to deal with another foreign word? Skepslog. What does that mean? What kind of log is that? Well, actually, if you break it down, you've got the skeps part refers to a ship. The log is actually law. That's something we can come back to later, in fact. So it was the ship's law, basically, that governed the crew. And then when I rejected that, somehow I got the idea of the word kindred. I don't even know how, but it was just seemed like something that was warm, something that was inviting, something that would draw people together, like kindred spirits, all of that. And that seems to have caught on. And, now people who never heard of me, or the old AFA, or much less the old Viking Brotherhood, are using it. And
so wait, you coined kindred, the word kindred?
Yeah, as far as I know, I did.
Wow.
I've been around a long time, Dave. Come on, man.
That's incredible. That's incredible.
Me and that guy go way back.
That's incredible. I bet there's a lot of people out there that probably aren't a big fan of either of us that use that word.
Probably lots of them.
Yeah, they don't even know where it came from. What a bunch of jerks.
Whatever. And they would deny it anyway. They say, "Oh well, no, really, Donnie Dumbass in Lower Mongolia or something, was the first one to use it, whatever, So I don't care. I don't need to take any credit for it. It's common property. I'll even let people I don't like use it. Not like I would have any control over that. Whatever. I don't want to pay attention to them anyhow. So actually, and I wish that Edred were here right now, because we had a conversation a few decades ago in which we compared those two terms, the skepslog and the kindred. And he said that he really preferred the skepslog because it was more structured. It was definite. It was a little more defined. It wasn't just, let's get a lot of people together and everybody's gonna get along fine, and it's like a big family, and so forth and so forth. And all of that's true and all of that's good. But at the same time, the idea of the skepslog, the ship's law, has a little more structure. There are people. People have jobs. There's the guy who leads, the guy who navigates, there's the person who steers, there's the people that take care of the logistics. And in a way, that's not a bad idea. I think that maybe he would have liked to have seen a little more structure than we actually ended up with. And there's certainly lots to be said for having people with specific jobs. But of course, kindreds can do that too. But it doesn't come naturally to the concept of a kindred. Or, it takes a leader who says, "Well, okay, I need somebody to do this and somebody to do that." Then that leader has to have enough authority to where they say, "Okay, sounds good to me." So, it's those were the early days, and it was quite a lot later that the old Asatru Free Assembly started looking at tribes, the idea of tribes. There was something more with more permanence about a tribe. And so I wanted to find out, well, how did the old tribes work? And again, I wish Edred was here because I want to ask him the name of a particular book that I can no longer find on my shelves. Someone once said that loaning a book is the slowest form of theft. Although I don't this one I just lost somewhere back with the 800 or 1,000 other books behind me in this storage area here. But the book had a simple tribe like the Germanic tribes, and I want to say that the guy who wrote it, his last name was, well, I shouldn't even guess that. I don't know, but it was really good. And it was really elementary. He looked at the overall pattern of Germanic tribes. And what he found was that basically there were three parts. There was the leader, who usually there was a leader. This is the basic generic. There was a leader. There was the assembly of influential guys, and then there was the group of armed men who voted in the thing. And had their role in their, but that wasn't always the way it was. There were some tribes that have a leader except in case of war, or maybe they would have two different leaders, of one military, one political. And this is stuff that we've examined before a little bit, but I think it says something about the way our people think. It says something about the structure of our own minds, in addition to the structure of our society, something that may or may not be unique to us, but which certainly does seem to be kind of hardwired, because essentially those same institutions are reflected in the Constitution of the United States. So tribes, we never succeeded in creating anything I could call a tribe. We gave it our best, but there was always stuff in the way. But I still think it's a good idea, and I agree with Edred that it is a good way, if not the best way, of having a revolt against the modern world. And it's a lot easier than going out and trying to overthrow something.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Sure. When I talk about, I'm sure people watching that are familiar with me and familiar with Rory and my boy Kaiser and a lot of these guys. We're familiar with the term radical traditionalism, which is kind of like a meme that we started, and that's very much in line with kind of our whole thing that we had going on. Which, in my opinion, the people that want to oppress us, the serpents, the vampires, whatever you want to call them, the elites, whatever they are. The reptiles, if they're shapeshifters, whatever, who knows? Maybe that guy that David is.
I will tell you all about it, man.
Yeah, maybe that guy's right. But anyway, what they have worked on for so long is to, as we mentioned in the beginning, to decay and destroy the family unit, to isolate us, to atomize us, to take us away from our tribes, to take us away from what gives us strength. And the tribe is more important than just kind of guys getting together, families getting together, and having barbecues and cookouts, which is absolutely wonderful. Don't get Big Dave's a grill master. Anybody that's come to my house can verify. Nothing against grilling. Like, I'm maximum grill all the way. But there's more to it than just that. There's metaphysical strengths as well. When you form a tribe and you weave your weird in with other people and you guys get permanently tied together, there are metaphysical components to this. And as far as when it comes into reincarnation and stuff like that, reincarnation happens within your family line. These things are absolutely all tied together, and the elites know this. They know this. They know what they're doing. So in when we talk about rad trad, what we're talking about is we're taking their centuries of work that they have tried to isolate us and destroy our families and stuff like that, and bam, taking it back in an instant. Taking their scheme, their nefarious scheme, crumpling it up and throwing it in the garbage and fighting them and revolting against the modern world right away, overnight, just by organizing organically and getting together with your family and having Sunday dinners. Everybody knows about hashtag Sunday dinner. We're bringing it back. This destroys the poison that they have injected into our culture and our society and our spirits, and takes it back and brings us back to a healthier form.
I just had a message slide across the bottom of my screen there from our guest. He says that he quote tried to download unquote the link you sent. I don't know if that means clicking on it or not, but there apparently was an attempt by him to do that.
That's okay. We'll get him. We'll get hooked up with him on another time.
Well, I don't know. Let's give him a shot.
Yeah. See if he can get in, then wonderful.
I don't have anyone here. Maybe I can get Sheila on that. Give me a second. Sheila, give me a hand up here. I would really not like to disappoint him if I can possibly make this work tonight. We can run a little over. Come on across. Say hi to Dave.
Hey, Dave.
There she went. Okay. Edred just sent a message, presumably Facebook. I don't know what. Check that out. Get back with him.
He said, I told the guy I could only use the telephone. He sent a link to the Hangout app, which I downloaded, and nothing is popping up on my screen here.
Oh, God.
Can't use this telephone.
All right. We'll have a quick intermission then. We'll talk about. You want to have a quick intermission, Mr. McNallen?
Yeah, let's take 2-3 minutes. I'll be back.
Okay.
All right, everybody stand by. We have Plan B coming on. We have Mr. Thorson coming on the line right now. Make sure you like, subscribe, share. We'll be on in 2 minutes. Okay. 3, 2, 1.
Tonight, Edred Thorson, the absolute go-to man on anything dealing with Germanic esoterica, and I don't say this lightly. His qualifications include a doctorate in the subject, a mastery of the relevant languages, and literally decades of personal exploration and personal practice. His new book, among many, because he's always cranking out lots of books, is titled Re-tribalize Now, and we're going to talk about that and a lot of other things. Good evening, Edred. How the heck is Texas?
Hot, but you know that. It's July.
Yeah. Well, I tell you.
Now that I'm old, it's harder than when I was young. I tell you.
Yeah. How did that happen, man? It's not like the days that we used to run around with
long
our...
enough, it happens. That happens.
Yeah.
When you just hang out long enough. Yeah.
I guess the alternative is not to hang out here, but this is where our job is, so that's okay.
Yeah, no complaints.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we finally got this to work. Dave and I were sitting here ad-libbing and trying to come up with a plan B, but none of the plan Bs were as good as the plan A, so I'm really looking forward to this. For those that don't know you, I'll just say that you've been around a very long time doing this, and you and I go back, way back at the beginning of all this too, actually. Would you like to just give them like a quick synopsis of what you do, where you've been, and what you're about? Just like give me a 2-minute or who the heck is this Edred Thorson guy?
Right. Well, I am just a normal guy from Texas, who suddenly one day got the idea that I want to go to Germany and live there and learn the language and this, that, and the other when I was just in high school. And so I went and I learned, and then I came back and said, well, I got to go to college now. And I was starting to get really into all kinds of strange and occult kinds of things. This was 1971, 72, 73. And that was just in the air, very heavy in those days, as you remember. And so I came to the University of Texas and began to study, and luckily had all of the resources at my disposal when one afternoon I heard the word whispered into my ear, Rune. And I thought, what in the world is that? And so then I started to, and I wasn't really interested in school that much at the time, but suddenly I was interested in school because I wanted to discover and learn what this thing was all about. And at the University of Texas at the time, one of the greatest professors in the world for Germanic studies, Edgar Polme, was professor. And so that began a long trail of study in the academic world, but constantly in parallel with these esoteric interests, which I had originally entered into the field together with. So, curiously and fortuitously, I think, these two sorts of things, the esoteric and the exoteric, were wound together in my person. And so that was the way that I went forward and began to write. I was very precocious that way. As a young person, not even 20 years old, I wrote my first book, which I could never get published, which became Futhark. But publishers just said in 1975, runes won't sell, so nobody would publish it. And so that was the way it was then. And so I continued on in my studies and in all ways. And in the esoteric world, I developed my own curriculum for runic training, esoteric runic training for myself, and then later published those notes and findings and so forth in a more complete form in the form of 9 Doors of Midgard. and founded the Rune Guild, joined the then also true Free Assembly, went to the first All Thing, and so forth. And so the religion, the esoteric, runic, initiatory path, and the academic path all have been always part of my life from that moment in 1973 forward. And eventually I got my PhD. I studied in Germany under the great runologist Klaus Dübel in Göttingen. And so I got my PhD in 1984, and in the same month, Futhark, Handbook of Rune Magic, was published in that same month. So that was kind of synchronistic.
That was synchronistic rather than planned.
Oh, no, it wasn't planned. It took me, Futhark had a strange path because, like I said, I finished my first book, which was in the Armanen tradition. So as I see it, as I write about in the book, History of the Rune Guild, a lot of which is autobiographical, I see that failure of the publication of the book, which became, I've recently put out his manuscript of it that I wrote in 75, called The Runic Magic of Armanen. And but I think that was the hand of the old man, as I sometimes call Odin, saying, this is wrong, this is bad, this is not traditional, you need to be thwarted, your sword needs to be broken, and you need to be put down. I mean, Odin, is not always nice. It doesn't just say, oh, just whatever you want, follower, I'll just provide it, whatever.
He's not a do-your-own-thing kind of guy.
Right. So it's back to school. You got to go back to school. This is wrong. So but then when I finished Futhark in 1979 thereabouts, it was still, no one publisher wanted it. I but couldn't publish it, just financial problems. One out of Minnesota, we all know. And then Weiser took it, but it was from 1979 to 1984 before it came out. So anyway, that was the story of Futhark.
Yeah.
So, and then since then, we've, the Rune Guild has developed and had its moments of grandeur and betrayal and renewal, and now the Rune Guild is in wonderful, fantastic leadership, apart from myself, and I'm very happy to see it flourishing the way it is now, and I'm just writing. My plans are now to finish a number of projects over the next 4 years now, and get my major writing projects out of the way, and then embark and begin to try to learn something of the things I'm obviously not all too good at, this sort of new technology, and start to do videos, audios, etc., main purpose of which is to bridge the gap that has been created by the invasion of academia, by the cult of political correctness, which has broken the chain of tradition with regard to our traditional studies. As I was taught by Edgar Ptolemy, people like him were not replaced by people like him subsequently. So they've broken that. I could not get a job anywhere teaching this kind of thing because there's just any kind of Germanic studies before 1500 are just out. They're still here and there, of course, but where they were in 1,000 places before, they may just be in 25 now. That kind of reduction has gone on. And those where they still exist probably only exist because some old professor is keeping it alive. But in general, it was targeted for elimination. Anything before 1500, really, that was sort of their watershed mark there. It's not modern. It's hard. It's difficult for our students to handle these languages, etc. So, what my purpose, or what I would like to do in the next phase, is to try to take this kind of material and present it just as it would be presented in a university course, so that even if nobody wants to hear it today, it's still on record. And even a subsequent generation, it'll be there. It'll be on the record.
Now, this is a battle you've actually been fighting for a number of years in different ways, as I recall. You know, you've always tried to make this sort of thing available and to keep the standards up and the information out there for those who are interested. And you've always been fighting the battle of academe. You know, you're battering away at the walls of political correctness. You know.
Right, and even things like I just really completed a book called The Runic Revival, and it's from Johann Buder to the Rune Guild, and it's a pretty substantial book about the revival of runic practice and interest and so forth from the early modern times, after the true demise of the old tradition, which really didn't totally die out in 3 places in the province of Dalarna in Sweden, on Gotland, and in Iceland. People still sort of kept up the tradition of runes to some extent. But in general, in a broad sense, it died out. And so people like Johann Buder and Ole Wurm and others started to revive it academically. Johann Buder, of course, was also a magician or a occultist or alchemist and so forth also. And so from that time forward, this book handles both the esoteric revival and the academic revival, showing how they really didn't work in tandem to Johann Buder started doing it, but generally they went their separate ways. They didn't really inform one another as time went on, and so the purpose of the Rune Guild, again, being a kind of a mirror of my own pathway, is an attempt to bring these things back together, and what I call integral runology.
Right, something that uses the strengths and the values of both the esoteric and the exoteric to get a complete
both of
picture.
them can be pretty idiotic. The academic man can be pretty idiotic in his own, as well as, of course, we know many of the rune books of the 80s, Ralph Blum forward with blank runes and whatnot and so forth, pretty bad stuff also. So, that's the purpose of that book. And I'm writing also, completing a scientific, totally academic introduction to runology also, which is really sort of lacking for the most part, especially lacking in anything that costs less than $60. But it's mostly, I have written most of runology nowadays is in the grip of these people that one academic runologist, R.I. Page, called skeptical runology. See, they wants to deny that runes have anything to do with magic or anything like that. It's just writing, script. It's just writing like any other, and and they just don't. And the reason I get into it in the Runic Revival book is their motives for this, which are complex but pretty clear. That they want to simplify their discipline, also separate it from questionable values such as paganism or other things that have occurred in Germany in the 30s and 40s and things like that, which they have problems with sometimes, and all of this sort of thing. They have a motive for interpreting things the way they do. That's one of the things that my Professor Edgar Polemic stressed to us, as students, was when you start to study something, whatever it is in the academic world, it is very valuable to undertake the history of the interpretation of that field, what's called in German the Forschungsgeschichte, the history of the investigation or research. And there you learn about who did it, why were they thinking this way, what were their other factors involved, and why are they interpreting things the way they are.
It would be very interesting to see that principle applied to the neo-Marxist material that's bouncing around in most schools right now, wouldn't it?
Right. Well, yeah, I'm reading about investigating that the Weimar, world of Weimar, and what went on in the Frankfurt School, of the Marxist School for Social Research, and that sort of thing, and how they didn't really get too much traction in Germany, obviously, for what was about to happen, but that they did have this Marxist interpretation of all disciplines, right? Did have great traction in the United States already in the 20s, and so it was a pretty steady climb, probably. It just seemed like it happened all of a sudden to me, but actually, of course, I saw when I came into the university in 1973, there were this 3 or 4 professors here are Marxists, and that seemed fine because, it's like a museum of characters and people who believe this stuff that they teach, and that seemed fine. But then, within a very short period of time, it turns out that those people and their attitudes were the only acceptable ones, and nobody else was there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a mutual friend of ours has mentioned to me that Germanic studies in some places it's down to a matter of the proper pronouns for genders and stuff like that. That's kind of the level they're working at.
We have 3 genders.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Those are some of the things I've been working on here recently. I've just had this book that you mentioned in the introduction is being published, of course, by Arcana Europa, and will be out pretty shortly, if I understand.
Okay. Very good. Well, when it comes out, we'll be glad to let people know about that. That would be great. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. And then, so I got that. And so been working on many things. I try to write about 750 words a day, and if I keep that pace up, I can probably write all these books in the next 4 years.
We're pretty much of the same age, I guess, right?
Yeah, you're a little my senior.
A little bit. Probably. Yeah. I'm at the point where I'm consciously planning how many years do I have left, and can I get these things right here done in that length of time? And this sounds totally batty, but I'm ensuring I get enough exercise, and I'm eating right, and I want to live as long as possible, not because I want to hang on to life per se, but because I've got butt to kick. There's a lot of ass to kick, and I want to be here to do it.
Right. It looks like the way that's my strategy on that is, of course, you're a professional butt kicker, and I'm not.
There's different kinds of butt kick. I think you've got a whole can of intellectual whoop ass right there on your desk right now. I know you do.
Right, but that's I think that what we need, the way things look is that there's going to be a generational hiccup for sure, right? Because where there's going to be a gap, and that's what I think the strategy that, and I think the other side kind of knows this. I say if we can stamp it out and prevent it from jumping the gap, then we've got then it's over. And it will take another generation to be totally transformed and motivated to dig this stuff up, just like out of the dirt, But if we take measures to pass it on, then we'll both. Maybe it'll work. Maybe it'll take. Maybe, but certainly, I'm thinking more. Plant these seeds and make this available, accessible, but not dumbed down or made palatable, watered down or dumbed down. And
it's interesting that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, then there will be the generation immediately. They'll probably rebel against this nonsense, and there'll be something there for them to take up arms with. As far as,
of course, the Rune Guild will play the Rune Guild will play a huge function in this, right? That gives you an organic, ongoing.
And I think you can attest to this. One of the great things about the Rune Guild is that it seems to be immune from, and not by any kind of policy, but just through culture, immune from the polarizations that plague our culture in general and our movement in particular. This demonizing of other people, of this side, that side, so forth, instead of rowing together for common goal. There's like just more fighting among the bench mates than across the Western Shore for sure. And but the Rune Guild seems to be a place where people of all sort of persuasions, as far as their mundane interests are concerned, would all sit down in peace, for the common, cover of the All-Father's cloak.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily planned, although I would say this thing about that people have sometimes said, we need to have a statement about the fact that we accept all people, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, it's not that. You don't come out and do an affirmative action program or say anything about that. You just be it.
Just be it. Just be what you are. Yeah.
Yeah, and just and be that way. As far as with the focus on the work, and someone comes and says, I'm interested, then start spitting out a bunch of litmus tests about what they think, or what they are, who they are, what they're doing, or whatever. You just take them at their word that they're interested and proceed on, and there will be problems here and there, but that's life.
Well, yes. Yeah, it is. Now, I know we're kind of on the subject of the Rune Guild, which is okay because this is, this is kind of a wide open examination. We will get to tribes here in a bit, I think. Let me see what time. Ooh, maybe we should go on to that pretty soon.
You are a person, as I said, I think I first heard the word or formula Re-tribalization in something you either said or wrote back in the 70s,
I think that we were working on something like that very early. A bit later, when we I know that the last, let me look around on my shelf here as I walk about, the last paper edition of the Runestone. Here we go. Which here we go. Fall issue. No, disregard. That was 1998. Fall issue. I'm fumbling. Anyway, whatever. The back in that about 2000, I think, we were giving that another go. I mean, it was an important thing, and we didn't want to abandon that. And I remember that in one issue, the last actual paper issue of the Runestone, there were two articles. One was on the historical tribes in terms of just a very general overview of their structure and so forth and how they worked, and then there was another one on how we could go about doing that in the future. And that never materialized, and I'm really glad to see that you're heating that idea up, because I think it's very viable.
Yeah, I don't think I'm the private. I've tried, and you've tried, and I don't think I'm the person to do such a thing. I'm too much of a loner and aloof, and I think that it just requires certain kinds of people. But again, it's this idea. The Re-tribalized Now book is is an encouragement, laying it out, encouraging, strategizing, giving people something that you can sit there and say, hey, I think I can want to do this. I think I can do this. I think we're already doing it very much similar things, and this might just formalize it, because I think that one of the things that re-tribalization that most people in the Osotru world or the pagan heathen type world, etc., they always make, I think this is a tremendous mistake in retrospect, is that the tribe as an exponent of the cult. And I think that is where it goes wrong. Because I think it should be community, tribe, practical interest of the people first and foremost, and then matters of myth come to support that, rather than it being a cult with sociological dimensions. Because I think it is too close. But it's too cult-like, so that people, when they become disaffected or they just don't like the way this, that, or the other ritual goes, they just pick up their stuff and leave. They just come out, or their leaders are going to apply orthodoxy tests, etc. So in this book, I try to emphasize community first, individual freedom foremost, families being the real units which enter the tribe, that the way to enter a tribe is to be born into it, blood brother or oath into it, adopted into it, or marry into it. But you don't join it like a cult, I'm going to fill out my membership form and here become part of this tribe.
Right.
But
it is fundamentally. So do you tell me more about the size of tribes, and how does this work out geographically? These are people that are relatively close proximity to each other, right?
I would say that it has to be. Depending, I classify the three different types of things. Most people think about people out on the country, on land and everything, but it could be three different sort of demographic descriptions of where tribes could exist. They could be urban. It could be everybody's living in this. One guy moves 3, 4, 5 into an apartment complex, and they just take that thing over. That's it. They're all living there in close proximity in an urban environment, very close together, or suburban, I would say, just being in the general vicinity, but never more, maximum 30 minutes away from everyone, you see. And that would be the outer limit of it. It has to really be something more on the average of just 10 minutes away. So that, again, it's what I see the tribe doing is like, Joe's car breaks down. Well, Jim goes and picks him up, and takes him to the garage. That's just what happens. That's just like family. But if you extended family and trust in a world where, who's going to fix my air conditioner, etc. Also, that the tribe not value that everyone is valued for their contributions and their who they are and what they bring to the table. It doesn't have to. What happens with the religious orientation overly so is like they become like the people who know the most about the lore or something like that get this incredible prestige, and others are just kind of hanging on. No, all these practical things are contributions. This is a material universe we're living in, and material themes and actions and crafts and things like that are extremely important. We cannot survive without it.
So how would you describe the difference between, say, a kindred and a tribe? Because that's a comparison that most people would be familiar with.
Well, I would have said a kindred is what I we call it a more neutral term for what the kindred is a clan. Clans make up tribes. There it is that there's concentric circles go like family, clan, tribe, and nation is something that's almost inconsequential in tribal life because it's so big, right? I mean, in traditional ancient times, the nation was pretty meaningless, right? That Germanic people would have some kind of affinity for one another. No, they probably hate each other, this tribe or that, more than they feel any kind of solidarity with them just because they can understand them. And they're just as likely to make an alliance with the Celtic tribe down the road to fight them as they would be to be friends with them over the Celtic people. See, just like I like to point out, Battle of Clontarf, right? Well, there's just as many Germanic peoples on each side and just as many Celtic people on each side. It's not, whereas in the 19th century, the battle is portrayed as a nationalistic struggle by the Irish, of the Irish over foreign invaders, to make a point against the English. But but it wasn't that way in reality, because people had their personal alliances with their lords and other people that were very personal, not theoretical or symbolic. Really, they were real, direct things. So a kindred is the same as a clan to me. I mean, that's just a more Germanic word for people. I remember there was a professor at the University of Texas. She was taught Indo-European things, and she was trying to make like a game, like a role-playing game kind of a thing, to teach Indo-European stuff. And when it came to the organization of the groups, there was, we have a class. She said, I can't use that word. Do you know another word?
So some people just need to be slapped.
Well, that's just generally the word. Yeah, that's of course a Celtic word. And then there's another part of the picture that this book, the sort of the authoritative book on tribes, is this huge giant German book by Professor, it was written in 1961, but and he points out, I'm sure he wasn't the first, that the idea of the village is also extremely important to the whole picture. That is, there are settlement areas where you have where people come to sell stuff, right? And where people, where the blacksmith is, and just the craftsmen sort of congregate in a place. And those people may not, will tend maybe perhaps not to be have that strong a tribal connection, but they do provide a service to various tribes. And so that's where people gather. Of course, that's what has happened in our world, is that the village, you remember famous Hillary Clinton, it takes a village, that kind of thing. That the village idea, as small and sort of this clearing in the woods over here, has really come to dominate our whole globe. right? Because that's what happened in Greece and Rome. They were city-states, right? The tribes lost their power and meaning progressively to the commercial, urban, the village, even though they became mega cities eventually and so forth. But that, so I think you want to realize the history of that and you use that feature as a thing, but not let it beware that it could come to dominate your interests or that sort of thing. But anyway, that's I use that book quite a bit. It's by Reinhard Venskius. So,
and obviously in German, and probably semi-unobtainable.
Oh yeah, it's very unobtainable. I mean, it's just one time, but it's I didn't really summarize it anyway. Oh, I did. I summarized a lot of his basic theories in this book, so as you can see how he broke it down and everything. A lot of it is just just unusable information. Interesting, but not really essential.
Right.
You know.
Right. So in the modern world,
yeah.
In the world we have today, how would you see tribes interacting with the formal structures of the state? Do we ignore them? Do we replace them? What do you think?
No, I don't think you want to, first of all, not plan on replacing them. First of all, because, one tribe, like we have, then you have the situation which you're familiar with, such as you have in Africa, where one tribe dominates a nation, and you have, it's an atrocious situation, right?
Yeah. Exactly.
Because really each tribe should, there was the model that was used by Cyrus the Great, the first Persian Empire, is the healthy, real, true model, which is that nations, tribes, and whatnot should all be encouraged to exist in isolation from one another and communicate with one another, but each on analogy with a garden, right? If you have a beautiful garden, you have beds with this flower and that flower and so forth. You don't want to say, well, let's just mix them all together, or let's breed all the different roses together so we have one color of rose. These are not making for beautiful gardens. So the Persian Empire had all of these nations, and they didn't try to mix them or bring them under one. Right, that's why the Persian emperor was called the King of Kings, used by an appellation for another guy later. But that's what his form. That's what Shah means, which is the word in Persian for emperor, means King of Kings. Okay. And so that's the healthy model as far as all of them should exist and one not. And that's why an emperor might be important at some stage. You see, if an ideal is somebody to keep the order between and among the different interests. But you see an empire in the middle of Europe, which has existed peacefully for 500 years, as one of the most advanced. Certainly, everyone says their government is exemplary. We're talking about Switzerland. But it is an empire. It's a little mountainous empire with French speakers, German speakers, Romansh speakers, and Italian speakers, each having so many cantons to themselves, each governing themselves and cooperating on where cooperation is needed, independent where that's preferable. And it is a beautiful system.
And this is so interesting because I was thinking about this very question, I don't know, a week or two ago, and I thought, God, Switzerland, there you got it, and everybody's armed. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, your obligation is to be ready to defend the place if you know the Russians or whoever come roaring through the passes. Of course, they
Right,
won't
and
get
they
past
got
the
a place to
demolitions
go in
and
case
stuff.
of nuclear holocaust. Each
Yeah.
Swiss person has a place, assigned place to go underground. So if there was worldwide destruction, you would have a lot of oligarchs from Russia because they have the same thing. You'd have a few doddering idiots from the United States that would go underground, right? I mean, but it would be few people. You'd have the whole Swiss nation, and you know, and so it may be
bank vaults. They'll all be in
that's-
bank vaults.
it might be for a science fiction writer that would be a good plot.
Yeah, it would.
You know, so the Earth becomes Swiss.
Right.
And the Swiss are kind of sterile. It's always seemed to me when I was there. You know, even though I was in German-speaking areas, they're just like, this is different. This is not like Germany or Austria as far as just the way the people are and so forth. They're kind of different.
Well, someone once said that Germany has been through turmoil and strife and struggle and war, and they've contributed great philosophers and great scientists and et cetera, and Switzerland has had peace and prosperity, and they've given us chocolate and the cuckoo clock, and I don't know.
Carl Jung.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's all I got.
and actually, one of the best books I ever read on resistance warfare was written by an officer in the Swiss Army, so, which has yet to be tried out. So I don't know. It may not be that good a book. I guess it hasn't been tested. Hopefully, never will be.
The way to interact, I have whole sections in there about that where you see negative examples, positive examples. What I tried to do was just show where tribal type of organizations productively interact with the society around them, the state or the culture around them, where we see people like the Mennonites or the Amish, etc. You see bad examples such as the Rajneeshis, who just balled it all up. But that where you see these things, where you see the bad examples, good examples. One person wrote to me when I was sort of kicking this around on Facebook and said, well, the best way to interact is just to be secret in the sense that you don't fly a flag or have a name, some provocative name or symbols or whatever. We're just family. We're just a group of people, and just don't let people really have a. In other words, I would just say don't fly a flag. But I'm not saying that's what should be done, but that is a strategy. That's one strategy. But certainly, what I suggest is when you come in, let's just say you come in, you have your few families, you've got your thing, and is go to the local officials, go to the football games, interact with people, do business with them. That be really one of the roles in the tribe is somebody who's kind of a liaison officer for the local community, so that you get on good terms and stay on good terms with them. Such things as, say what happened in Waco. I mean, they had good relations locally, but the federal government didn't care. They didn't know anything about those relations. But that's the other thing, is you stay away from, don't, an arm, or so many of the people we know, are gun aficionados, and they have these dreams. I mean, I hear them every weekend here. We live, out in the woods, and every week it's got boom, 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 firing these automatic or whatever kind of.
God, I love Texas. God, I love Texas.
But I know the guy's pulling the trigger, thinking. I know what he's dreaming. I know what he's thinking.
Yeah.
And all that. But it's like, well, that's really not where this battle's going to be won.
Right.
Because they'll always have something, bigger and more of it. I mean, and all of that sort of thing.
I think people who fantasize about that, really need to reappraise the not just the unpleasantness, but what does this while they're shooting at each other, what's happening on the international scene? Welcome to the world run by China,
Right. But you said like the Red Dawn movies or whatever, that kind of, all these things. But so I would say, don't be stockpiling weapons. Don't be doing anything questionable with regard to, sexual things like that. If that's going on, just keep that quiet. But don't, say, oh, they're marrying a little girl, or whatever. You got to stay away from the red flags. First of all, because it's probably wrong. Some of it is wrong. Some of it is just, not effective.
And all of it is open to misinterpretation. I think everybody should be prepared for all, of course, contingencies. But if you fetishize it, if you make a big, certainly if you go public with that kind of stuff, you're just asking for trouble.
Yeah. So
even
you
in
stay away
Texas.
from the red flags. You stay away from the red flags, and you make nice with the local people, and pay attention to that as they don't just think everything will be fine, because it will tend not to be. Just like some of the peaceful, nice Amish people, they go out to Montana or wherever, and the locals start burning their barns because why'd you do that for? Well, they don't come down to the shop, shop here at the hardware store. They don't give us their business. They're just loners, suspicious. We don't like them.
Right.
And so that kind of an attitude. Well, you got to go. You got to interact with them. You got to play nice with the locals. If you're in a rural setting, I think the urban environment may be even more feasible in many ways to tribalization. It's just people don't think of it that way. But of course, also I think that the rural is part of it. Is that tribal? As I kind of make a list. I said, this is what you want. Think of a tribe as a team, right? And you need or would want to recruit or ideally have various kinds of team members in a certain kind of balance as far as things go. Teachers, a plumber, you need a couple of plumbers, you need electrician, carpenter, all these kind of people with all these kind of abilities. And it'd be thinking of it as a cultural team, or like your old like a crew, like the ship's crew, right? We have our various roles here, and so that's and each one very valuable. And
we touched on that earlier. I mentioned to people before you came on your comments regarding the skepslog versus the kindred. How you kind of like the previous, and I kind of explains the difference between those, and dealing with you got a structure, different duties assigned, and so forth and so forth.
And that's one of the big things I emphasize, because a lot of people are calling a band, German word, Männerbund. They're calling those tribes nowadays. That is, we're at work, right? And you got this, that's where a tribe, like thinking of the workplace as a tribe. No, a Männerbund, yes. I mean, we have a common goal, we have a purpose, we have roles, but we have assignments. It's a quasi-military or commercial, like the ship's crew. Well, we raid a little, but mainly we're traders, and we are businessmen. And sometimes the business involves, hacking, and most of the time it doesn't. Sometimes it involves converting to Christianity and getting the nice clothes and going on to the next place. But
get that free white shirt, right?
Yeah, we're out there to make a profit, make business, and bring the goodies home to the little lady and all that. And so that's just the warrior band. That's one way of organizing, but that is not a tribe. Some of those evolved into tribes, but not not all. They usually just existed side by side with the tribe. They can be within the tribe, or they can be, as like we have an example, like
Right.
the Rune Guild or the Arulians and so forth. They be inter-tribal network of people. But tribes are more organic, local people who are really have. So what's the purpose of a tribe? The purpose of a tribe is for each and every individual in it to thrive, and the whole tribe to prosper together, to be secure, prosperous, and thriving, happy people.
Or as
There's no
I put it,
great mission.
or as I've put it in the opening of this episode, honor, sovereignty, and well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, then we have
Well,
to have
you
the
know.
sense, and the things we cannot buy, that sense of solidarity and that sense of belonging and so forth. That cannot be bought with money.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Well, I think that we probably should plan on closing this out. We're actually about half an hour over what was expected, and I'm good with that because I've enjoyed it, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners are enjoying it just as much. But I don't even know exactly how to wrap this up. It says Dave has left the call, so maybe I just close it out. I'm not sure. So this is going to be kind of improvised. But before we close out, first of all, what sort of closing message do you have for people, and where can they find out about the things you publish, and how to buy them?
Well, most of the things I have available, in general, are available on Amazon. So look under either Edred Thorson or Stephen Flowers, Stephen Edred, Stephen E. Flowers, as far as the author is concerned. And so that would get almost all of it. I'm on Facebook as Stephen Flowers. People can email me at Rune@texas.net. Also, I welcome correspondence of questions and that sort of thing. And I found it very valuable to talk to people. I'm pretty isolated out here with my books and critters and so forth. So I've found that talking to people or corresponding with them on specific topics has been very valuable for me on some of my projects. And so that's where I'm sitting right now. And but re-tribalization, I think, is the key to a new beginning for our culture, and that's what I hope people will seriously consider, how to use this idea to make their lives and those of their compatriots better. And it's a path of action, not thinking and so forth.
Yeah, well, agreed. I think it's a very useful concept. I look forward to seeing it, and I'm sure everybody else. Actually, folks, just look through all of his stuff. He's got so much outstanding stuff. Do you still? Did you sell all your copies of Woldanas?
No, I still have. I don't have any because I print them in batches, but I'm going to reprint a batch here shortly.
I was so impressed by that. I'm going to give that pitch right here, right now. Woldanas, Our Ancestral God of Sovereign Wisdom, by Stephen Edred Flowers, and it is essentially a proposal. If I'm reading it right, a proposal for the development of a formalized philosophy, which is drawn from our religious and spiritual mythic lore. Just in the same way that Greek philosophy ultimately has its roots in Greek religion, this would be the Germanic equivalent of something like that. Would that be a decent statement?
Right. Yeah, it's all. There's been recently. There's been some sort of bunny foo-foo treatments of Odin and so forth, and I said, well, I need to put this out there, and it's a very it's an interesting book in that it has a lot of extremely hardcore scholarly stuff about Odin, all of the names, all of the Haiti and analysis of all of them and that sort of thing. It also has a section in there about my personal relationship with the old man, and how I like some of the things I talked about at the beginning of this thing, about my relation and how I live with this entity, and then also just breaking it down into philosophical and cosmological, theological, and the origins and the deep origins, the Indo-European connections with Odin, and where that all comes from, and things of pretty radical, deep level, root level material at each turn. So it's
I'm very much enjoying it, and at some point, maybe on another program, let's have a conversation about that. And the one question in my mind is, how does this compare with, say, the French New Right with Alain de Benoit and so forth? You know, is this an expression of that? And so, you know, a whole tons of things we can discuss on that. And I think that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So, all right, I'm not quite sure how to wrap this up. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read my. Oh, you're still there, buddy? Okay. All right. Let me just read my exit, and then we'll say goodbye to our audience, and then among the three of us, we can sign off with appropriate comments. How's that sound? All right. Wow. Mind-bending. That's all for tonight, folks. Keep your powder dry, your cupboards full, your spouse happy, your children close, your data out of the hands of the deep state, and love life in Midgard, for it is a wondrous gift. So all you folks out there listening in, thank you very much, and we'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.